Caged is one of the most hotly debated topics in guitar. Some people call it the key to fretboard freedom, other people call it a useless detour on the true path of triads and arpeggios. So what's the truth? The truth is, you're asking the wrong question. It's not about Caged, it's about you. Caged is a tool, plain and simple. And as guitarists, we go through our journey collecting an assortment of tools to put in our chest. And like any tool, Caged can be used improperly. Yeah man, Caged is awesome if you want to play in boxes your whole life. Ironically though, a lot of the detractors end up putting Caged in a box by treating it like it's little more than a new set of bar chords. And believe me, I know that's enough to scare anyone away. Okay, E shape, I think I got that. Yeah, A shape, cool. D shape, what the?
Go suck an egg.
Fair enough, but if I've done my job, by the end of this video, you will have a grounded foundation in both the endless benefits of Caged and the potential pitfalls. But in case you don't make it that far, I'm actually gonna fast forward and give you the most important takeaway of this lesson right now. The true value in Caged is understanding that these chord shapes equal the scale shapes that surround them. And there is magic in learning how to apply that. So let's get the basics out of the way. How does Caged work? We know that this fretboard is a mess of unorganized notes in different tunings that makes about zero logical sense. It's kind of like this big, giant, dense forest. Caged is gonna be the guide to the forest, and we're gonna explore this in 3 different stages. First, we're gonna set up familiar shapes to outline the forest using root notes as anchor points. Then we're gonna set up bridges between these shapes by breaking them into individual notes. Finally, we're gonna land on the ground and start exploring the trees and the wildlife in the form of intervals. All right, so for the nitty gritty, Caged is based on 5 open home position chords: C, A, G, E, D. So the basic idea is that we can take any of those 5 shapes, move it up the neck, and access different chords at new places on the fretboard. Now here again, I want to pause and re-emphasize that Caged is not about learning new bar chords. I've been playing on stage for more than 19 years. I've played several hundred different songs across genres including pop, rock, funk, R&B, classical, and I've used this D shape exactly 0 times. So if Caged isn't about bar chords, what is it about? Caged is about navigation. So in order to properly navigate, we need to use anchor points. And if you haven't already drilled this idea into your head, now is a good time to do it. Anchor points equal root notes. Everything centers around root notes, anchor points. We're gonna think of these anchor points, these root notes, as sort of the redwoods of the forest, the big mama, papa, legal guardian trees of the forest. So we need to understand how to find these root notes first, and then we build the chords around them. Now, I hate to break it to you, but this is where some necessary fretboard memorization comes into play. If you don't know your notes up and down the E and A string, you're not quite ready for Caged, in my opinion. And that's fine. Learn those notes, and the E and A shaped bar chord, taken from Caged, are great ways to do that. But if you already know your notes up and down the E and A string, then we're gonna be able to use the octave system to locate those notes on the other strings. So why don't we just go ahead and start with a G? We love G. So we're gonna start here. To find the octave, we're gonna skip a string and head up 2 frets. So right here in G, that's gonna be the 5th fret on the D string now, and we're ignoring that A in between. So this is a G, and this is a higher octave of a G. Now, when we're in this position though, we can't forget the high E, because everything that happens on the low E string is also happening on the high E. So in this position, we have 1, 2, 3 roots, and these are your 3 anchor points for the E position in Caged. Now let's find our next one. Just gonna move down to this octave that we found from here and root there. Now we're gonna do the same thing, but we have to account for that weird tuning in the B string. So once again, we're gonna skip a string, skipping over that G string, heading to the B string, but this time, instead of coming up 2 frets, we're gonna come up 3 frets. And that's gonna be our octave. And these 2 notes are your anchor points for the D shape. And if we build the whole D shape around it, we have that. Now, coming back to here, this is the higher octave that we just found here at the 8th fret. Now, these are gonna be the anchor points for your C chord. Now just imagine a C chord up here, you're right here, just put that other one down where your C would root. So this is going to be on the A string. We're skipping 2 strings this time, both the D and the G. And we're here at the 10th fret for G. That's your octave there. Okay, these are your anchors for the C shape. Now, once again, this is going to be the same thing we did in the E shape. We're rooted here. Again, this is G. We're going to skip a string, head up 2 frets. Boom, boom. And there's your octave again. Anchors for your A shape. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah. Now, once again here, our last time, we're going to head here to our G at the 12th fret, skip the B, and at the 15th fret for your G, which is kind of the same thing as this shape right here. Now this weird thing here is the only kind of tricky one. So we're gonna be skipping 2 strings again, just like we did for the C shape, and heading down 3 fret distance here, so 12 and 15. And those are your octaves for your anchors for the G shape. So if you can find the root, then you can find the shape that surrounds it. So let's look at that again. We have our three anchors here for G. There's the E shape there, okay? Let's look at the anchors here. We know that those are our D anchors. And again, this is a stupid shape. You're not gonna use this shape, but I'm just showing you. Then we have our C shape right here. This is actually a pretty useful shape, but it's kind of hard, so don't worry about it for right now. Okay, then again, you have your octaves here for your A shape, and then you have your octaves here for your G shape. So how are you gonna practice this? You're gonna do exactly what I just did. Take any note, find all of the octaves up and down that note, and then recognize the caged shape that's attached to those anchor points. So let's do it in C. We have C, C, and we just have our home position C chord right here. Then we move up C, C to our A shape, C, A. C, C, C. Here's our G shape. C, 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 E shape, C, C, D shape. Okay, so now that we've mapped out the forest, we want to start understanding how to bridge these shapes together. And I said at the outset of this video that the true magic here is in understanding that these chord shapes equal the scale shapes that surround them. And this is where that's gonna start coming into play. So we're gonna be working with the 5 pentatonic shapes for this one. Now, some people might object to this and say that you should start with the arpeggios or maybe start with the major scale. And I think there's some value there, but for me, the pentatonic gives a really good structural foundation for these ideas, and it's fun. There's room for immediate application. So it kind of checks 2 boxes for me, and you can add the other 2 notes to make the full diatonic scale pretty easily later. So the way that we're gonna start meshing these ideas together in our brain is by practicing them together. So here's how we do that. We're gonna start with G. I don't wanna mess with open strings because then that forces you to learn some new shapes, so I'm just gonna deal with the closed shapes for now. So when we start with G, we're actually starting with the E shape. So the first thing that we're gonna do is play the root notes, the anchor points for that shape. So for G, we have 1, 2, 3. After that, you're gonna play that chord. After that, you're gonna play that pentatonic scale. And that's gonna help link all of those ideas together. Now we'll move up to the next shape. We have our roots, our anchor points, we have our chord, and you can just do the power chord version of this since we established that that's a dumb chord. So you have your chord here, and then you have your surrounding pentatonic scale shape. Then you just move up the neck through every single one of those scale shapes. And that's gonna help create a neurological link between the scale shapes and the chord shapes. So now all of these pentatonic boxes belong inside the caged shape. So you have an organizing principle to understand them. So now let's talk about a way that you can easily apply this to your playing today. Let's say you're playing 2 measures over an A chord, playing here. So what we might do is we say 1, 2, 3, 4, playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's all well and good, there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes we get a little bit bored of just that straight chugging rhythm. So now let's see what happens if in the second measure, instead of just keep chugging along, what if we go to the pentatonic shape that's surrounding that and just noodle a little bit of a fill. So I'm gonna play this chord for the first measure, and then I'm gonna noodle around the top of the pentatonic shape in the second measure. Let's hear what that sounds like. 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. now it's not a matter of just memorizing shapes. It's a matter of applying those shapes, linking them to other ideas, and turning these abstract concepts into fundamental knowledge. Now, stage 3. We are on the ground, we are out of our helicopter, we are surrounded by trees. And now we get to take an up close and personal look at the real inner workings of music. Intervals. Intervals equal everything. Simply put, intervals refer to the distance between notes, and on guitar we use frets to measure the distance. But really, intervals are about the relationships between notes, and understanding those relationships gives us control of tension and resolution, or, in other words, the heart of music. So while we're down here, we're gonna think of the chord tones, the 1, 3, 5, and 7 is an honorary chord tone. We're gonna think of those as the trees that are surrounding us, that are establishing the foundation for our music. Now the 9ths, the 11ths, and the 13ths, and really you can just think of those as 2, 4s, and 6s if you want. That's the wildlife. Those are the tones that add the tension and the color. Now this concept of really internalizing these intervals, where they are, how they function together, this is a years-long journey. So don't expect it to happen overnight, and don't get frustrated that it takes a while to really start internalizing these ideas. But I have a few exercises that I think are really helpful at accelerating that process. So one way you can start doing this is by very intentionally targeting specific intervals in your phrasing. Get your looper out and set yourself a single chord vamp. Okay, then we're gonna think in terms of measures, and for every measure, you're gonna target a different chord tone. For the first measure, for this example, I'm gonna target the 1 of the chord. For the second measure, I'm gonna target the 3. For the third measure, I'm gonna target the 5. And then for the last measure, I'm gonna bring it back home to the 1. I'm just gonna give us a single chord vamp in A here. That is, all right. 4. There's the 1. There's the 3. There's the 5. And there's the 1. Now that can be a little overwhelming to try to do all at once at first. So if you're new at this, just try to play that single note. For that first measure, just play the root, okay? Just play. Second measure, 3. Third measure, 5. Last measure, 1. But the important thing is not about how fast you do this. The important thing is about internalizing where those chord tones are. And remember, intervals equal everything. So there are your 3 levels of CAGED. Outline the forest, find the bridges between the shapes, and land on the ground and start exploring that wildlife in the form of intervals. I really hope that you gained something from this lesson, and I truly view every person's musical journey as a sacred thing, so I'm sincerely honored to be invited into yours. If you found yourself having any aha moments during this video, please like, comment, and subscribe so that I can keep bringing you more of it. Now in my next video, I'm gonna do a deep dive into CAGED practice and application techniques, but until then, go ahead and check out my video on 3 pro practice tips to get you making the best use of your practice time. Cheers, my friends, and I hope to see you in the next one.